Welcome to Activate Your Introvert, the weekly radio show to uncover and unlock the entrepreneurial skills in your business. In this week's show, Introvert Myth of the Week. Introverts don't like people. Tip of the week is about goals and resolutions. And then finally, a discussion with Jane Gunn. Jane is known as the Barefoot Mediator. She's a professional speaker showing you how to create a work culture that is both collaborative, fun, and allows you to manage the inevitable change, challenge, and crisis. Just before speaking to Jane, we're in the graveyard zone of New Year's resolutions now, where apparently most people give up or have given up on their New Year resolutions. Maybe it's different this year, as nobody even started going to the gym due to lockdown, so they couldn't have given up. I think there's something better to think about. Surely developing success habits. Many people set goals because, let's be honest, that's all New Year resolutions are, because everybody else sets goals. And maybe that explains the faltering. How about you? I have an idea that big, loud goal setting may be sometimes an extrovert thing. I'd love your opinion on that one. Regardless, habits, doing things consistently, is more important than having a goal, I would argue. Motivation, of course, plays a huge part in supporting these new habits. Only you know what motivates you. What's worked for you in the past? I'm a fan of my Fitbit, which is a watch that counts my steps every day. It also tells me how much sleep I get, what I've eaten, drunk, and how much I weigh. In other words, it keeps me thinking about eating and exercising. And it supports new ones with a constant supply of data. It's a personal motivator of mine. And accountability. It's always looking at me from my wrist. Some people need clear rewards when they implement their new habits. Personally, it doesn't work for me, as I cheat and take the reward anyway. Here's a thought you might hate me for tomorrow morning and maybe in the weeks to come when you're getting dressed. Did you know that most people get dressed in the same way each day? That's to say that the 90% of us that wear underwear put the same leg in first. Tomorrow morning and many other mornings when you're getting dressed, you'll probably think about that one when you're least expecting to. Let it remind you of the habits that you want to develop. Use that as a stepping stone. Do let me know what tip you'd like to help you activate the entrepreneurial skills in your business, or what introvert myth you'd like exposed. Drop me an email, give me a call, or add it as a comment to your review on the iTunes store. I'd love to hear from you. But now it's time to chat to Jane. Welcome, Jane.
Hello, John.
Thank you so much for being here. Really looking forward to this discussion.
No, it's a real pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
We started off this one because there was a LinkedIn post that you had put that attracted quite a bit of discussion about conflict on the inside. And so I'd love to pick through the kind of main themes of that in a moment. Just before we start, I always ask my guests, are you an introvert or an extrovert? And more importantly, what does that mean to you?
Interesting question, John. I always thought I was an extrovert because I like people, I like social situations, I'm never shy, if you like. But then I've sort of fairly recently begun to think I am actually an introvert because, in fact, my energy comes from being on my own. I find it quite exhausting being in social situations, and I'm making quite an effort to be sociable. And my recharge my batteries by being alone and reflecting. And I realise that I need quite a lot of time to process the information that I take in on so many levels when I'm with people. And
what you picked up on there is one of the common myths where lots of people think that shy and introverted are the same.
Yes.
Now, just before we talk about the post, Your title, The Barefoot Mediator. I'm fascinated by that. Tell us a little bit more about what you do.
A very, very quick thing. I'm a lawyer by training. I've become a mediator, so I work as a neutral third party helping people in dispute. During lockdown, been working without my shoes on, described myself as the Barefoot Mediator, and then begun to think, what does that actually mean? And to me, it means distilling the essence of what I am as a mediator and then helping other people to find that part of themselves that helps them to be what I call a resolutionary, being able to resolve conflicts, both internal and external, in any situations they find themselves in. So it could be workplace, home life, community, whatever, but having that sort of inner sense of peace building and resilience that they're able to be really rather than do, and to actually not necessarily as a mediator, but to help sort of facilitate those peaceful, more calmer ways of dealing with things.
So far wider than mediation in the lawyer sense then.
Oh, much more, much more. And so for me, it's been a journey that I'm on. And what I want to do with this is to take people on a journey where they discover, themselves in a sense, and a greater sense of awareness of where some of the conflicts in our life, as you say, both internal and external, actually come from and how we can better understand them.
And that leads really nicely onto that LinkedIn post, which is, I think you started off by saying, have you ever felt conflicted on the inside because you were trying to please another person or fit into a culture that didn't feel quite right? And of course, it got lots and lots of debate going, and I thought it was fascinating, but perhaps you'd like to expand on that a little.
Well, my one of the principles that I work with is that a lot of conflict that we see externally in people's sort of behavior and reaction to situations and to other people comes from within. And in that post, I think I was exploring where is that rooted, and I do feel that two of the things I look at in terms of where does conflict come from are culture and conditioning. In other words, what have I experienced in the cultures that I've lived in, whether that's family, school, workplace? What cultures have I experienced, and what do they expect of me in those cultures? And then conditioning, what have I experienced in life has actually conditioned me to behave in certain ways. Those two things can create that internal conflict because in actual fact, we're behaving according to how we've been, what the expectations of the culture were, or how we've been conditioned, rather than through choice.
I think that's fascinating because certainly many introverts I speak to seem to be going through just that, where in many cases they're striving to behave, well, they perceive to be what's expected of them, which is much more of an extrovert model. And I think that sets up a lot of conflict.
Yes.
How do you help people like that?
Well, for me, it's really awareness. I think once you become, so I have a model that I go through with people, which is awareness, acknowledgement, and action. And I think the first thing is you need to be aware of what's actually going on and where it comes from. Then you have to acknowledge what is it I generally tend to do in those situations. And most people, whether in organizations or at home, our default thing is to avoid conflict and ignore it as long as possible. And then sort of what action should I take? How do I find the confidence and how do I find the choice so that I can take the action that's appropriate and relevant to me rather than something that's instinctive or that's expected of me by others?
And that's quite interesting as well, because you said that most people avoid conflict, and I guess that's because they see it as negative. I'm not sure. Is
Yes.
conflict a negative thing?
Not for me, no. I mean, the course that I run is called The Magic of Conflict, and I see it as something, I liken it to a garden, and that if you don't water it, it's going to die. So conflict's like the water. But what we do need to do in nature as well as in our lives is to catch, we know it's going to rain, let's catch and channel the water. And of course, we do that in society. We channel water through aqueducts and drains and all of these things. We know we're going to get a deluge of rain from time to time. We need to do that in our lives and in our businesses, catch the water and realize that without it, nothing is going to grow and be vibrant and green. And that's my definition of conflict.
Oh, I do like that. I think because the other way I sometimes think about conflict is how some people kind of hold on to everything until they almost explode, and that fits your dam thing, doesn't it? So suddenly the water just pours out and explodes everywhere,
Yes.
unless it's channeled.
Yeah, very
Oh,
much. So
fascinating.
like that, or it's like a volcano, where the pressure builds up and then there's how
Mm,
it goes off.
yeah.
So
So I think the point coming back to that is then you've got to truly understand yourselves and others in order to be the real you inside.
I think so. And I think, how much opportunity do we really get to do that? We bounce from one thing to the next. We go from family to school to college to university to whatever, whatever. And we keep going through different cultures and communities where expectations are there. And sometimes we don't have the opportunity even to question, do I fit here or do I not fit here? Why do I fit here? Does anything about this environment challenge me? Should I challenge the environment? We're just too accepting and go with the flow.
How would you help a tip for an introvert?
I think it's I think it's just being honest with yourself and realizing an introvert is not something negative, it's something positive. It's just a way of being, and the opportunity to understand yourself, where your energy comes from. Perhaps you're a deep thinker, celebrate that, understand it, and raise your level of awareness, I would say, is the tip for introverts. Tip for people dealing with introverts, I would say recognize that an introvert may be someone who's full of energy 1 minute and then needs to disappear off into a dark hole and recharge their batteries. I know my husband recognizes that. He can see the shutters come down, and like recognizing that, somebody could be the life and soul of the party and then they might switch off, nothing to do with you. Their batteries just run flat and they need to go somewhere and recharge it.
I often liken it to having a really old mobile phone. You've charged up and then you're just starting to use it, and suddenly you just watch the battery just drain just like that.
Absolutely. And, I now recognize that in myself. So that's part of my own self awareness. And rather than thinking, what's the matter with me? Do I not like these people or this situation? No, it's just that my battery is flat.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jane. Like all good conversations, they come to an end far too quickly. How can listeners get back in touch with you?
I'm on LinkedIn, John. I post there virtually every day. So that's a good place to connect with my content, with my sort of daily blogging, and then through my website, janegunn.co.uk.
Fantastic, Jane. Thank you so much for your time. It's been brilliant
It has
and really
been.
nice to catch up properly.
Thank you, John.
And now it's time for Introvert Myth of the Week. Those crazy stories that I hear and you hear, but some people actually believe. Introverts don't like people. Okay, let's start by saying the obvious. It's a myth, right? I'm an introvert. I like people. In fact, if I can't spend time interacting with people I like, then I struggle. Lockdown has affected many people in a similar way, as they don't get to meet others. Introverts and extroverts have been affected. It's just a simple way of going, introverts do need to spend time with people. It may be more interesting to think about why this myth is there. Here's some of my guesses. Number 1, the introversion is the same as shy myth. Number 2, a definitional thing. Introversion is not about liking or disliking people. That's being antisocial or not. Introversion is about energy, people energy. We might like people, but we get tired when we're around them. And number 3, a year or two ago, a discussion with a group of friends I had on the back of a boat after some challenging dives. It was dark, cold, deep, and there was quite a current. Given that we didn't see much either, it really was one of those days when you go, why am I in the water here? The group were discussing why not many people were there today. One comment was that some people don't like real diving, as they only ever do shallow warm water dives. Last week I was in a Zoom meeting, and some people didn't say much at all. I often don't. I know that later some of the louder voices from that room said that the quiet ones don't say anything as they didn't want to be there and they don't like people. I can see where that link could come from, but it's a bit like me saying that you don't like diving because you don't like the same diving as I do. Introverts do like people. They just don't want to interact with them in the same way as some extroverts do.
Thank you for listening to Activate Your Introvert, and I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. I'd love to see your reviews on the iTunes store. Thank you once again, and catch up with you next week.